actually access the tool, you can go from our homepage as well as from several other pages on our website. But for ease, I'll just show you straight from our homepage. So this is our Boxar website, and you can see here, hopefully, where my cursor is an icon called the New South Wales Adult Criminal Sentencing Tool. So as soon as you click on that, it takes you straight to the application. Immediately, users are presented with information. So you don't have to make any selections to be looking at something that's straight away useful. So what I thought I'd do is just walk you through a couple of examples of how specific questions might be answered. We've found that our users generally come with specific questions and they want those answers. So let's go to the application. Hopefully it'll pop up. Great. Right, so this is the first view that all users are presented with. And so immediately it gives you an overview of what's occurring in the New South Wales local and higher courts. So without applying any filters or any offence selections, you can see from this top left graph the general information about the sentences over the 5 years of pooled data. If you hover over each of the data points, you get extra information. So if you hover over prison, for example, you can see all of the counts that are there, as well as the proportions. So straight away from this first graph, you can see that fines are the penalty that are imposed most often. And you can see that the other penalty types there also. If you go to the next graph, the volume of offenders graph, you can see that over the 5 years, there have been an increasing number of offenders being convicted in the courts. More recently, it has dropped back, but it's still significantly higher than 2015. When you hover over the information, the little I next to each of the headings, it tells you a brief summary of what that graph is showing. So we mentioned before from the first graph that the fines were the most common penalty that's been handed down. And then from this graph, you can see what amount of fine is most common. So again, we haven't put any offence selection on. It's just when all of those offences are combined together, what is occurring. You can see further across, there's two infographics here that show the jurisdiction and also the offender's gender. So you can see that the majority of offences are handled in the local courts, and also most offenders, almost 80%, are male. If we come further down to the bottom left, we can see the sentence types over time. So across the first few years, you can see there hasn't been much change across each penalty type, but in 2017, there has been an increase in the supervised community sentences and a corresponding decrease in the unsupervised. There has also been a decrease in the number of fines being imposed. So this 2017 date, as most of you will be aware, was when the sentencing reforms first started. So it's not surprising that we are seeing these changes. We've then got the prison sentence duration and also the community sentence length duration graphs. So for the almost 11% of offenders that are being given a prison sentence, you can see that the majority are getting a 0 to 6 month sentence. For the almost half of the offenders that are getting a community sentence, you can see that whether it's supervised or unsupervised, it's usually between 6 to 12 months. So in terms of a specific example, you might have perhaps you're working in a DV team and you've got a new policy officer that started. And so you might want to show them, it will give them some understanding of the sentencing of offenders that are convicted of domestic assault. So in order to do this, they need to choose some offence selections. So if you click the offence division tab, you can see all of the different Australian and New Zealand standard offence classification offences. So these are in order from most serious to least serious. The other two, the subdivision and the group offences, they're in alphabetical order just because there are so many of them, as you can see. So it might make it easier for people when searching by alphabet. But for our example, domestic violence assaults, if we go back to the offence division and you check acts intended to cause injury, that's where assaults fit, and you'll notice as soon as you make a selection, all of the graphs update for whatever you've selected. It automatically reduces your subdivision and your group level offences too, to just those that are appearing within the division. So for our example, we were after domestic assaults. So if we click domestic assaults, again, you can see that they have further updated the graphs. If you wanted to go further, you can. You can look at domestic violence, common assault, or serious assaults not resulting in injury, or serious assaults resulting in injury. But for the time being, let's just stick with all domestic assaults. So here you can see from the first graph, the pooled data, the 5 years, you can see that almost half of the offenders are given an unsupervised community sentence. If you come down to the sentence duration graph, you can see that for those that did get an unsupervised sentence, almost 10,000 of those people received a sentence of 6 to 12 months. You can also see it looking up at the offenders, the volume of offenders. You can see that the number of people being convicted in the courts has increased over time. For the small amount that are receiving a fine, 8%, they're usually being fined between $300 to $1,000. You can see that most offenders are being tried in the local courts, or most matters are in the local courts, and most offenders are male. In terms of the higher courts, only 1%. So perhaps you would like to refine your selection and just look at those higher courts. So you choose higher courts here, and again, it updates all of your data fields. So immediately you can see that this jurisdiction graph has now been indicated that you're only looking at higher courts, 100% of matters in the higher courts. You can also see that the fine amount graph has disappeared, and that's because there were no fines handed down in the higher courts. You can see that the majority of offenders were receiving a prison sentence, and you can see that the prison sentences are a lot higher than what they were if you had the two jurisdictions combined. So if we wanted to start afresh and start it with a different inquiry altogether, you go up to the top here and you clear filters at the top right, and it resets our sentencing tool back to its default, where there's no filters on whatsoever. So as I mentioned before, often we do get asked by journalists for information. So one query that we've received has been that a journalist is interested in investigating whether the courts are being more or less lenient on people that are convicted of burglary. So for this particular example, the user would select unlawful entry with intent, or burglary, break and enter. And again, all of these visualizations update. You can see that the subdivision and the offence group have also automatically updated for you, so you don't need to make those selections. Now, if you're interested in over time, have the courts become more lenient or less? You can see that over time, more people have been convicted. And you can also see that the pool data, most people are receiving a prison sentence. And again, you can see the different types of prison sentences that have been handed down. The same information can also be seen on this sentences by year graph. And you can see again around 2017 that there's been a change. You can see that the supervised community sentences have been trending upwards, that the prison has actually been trending downwards. So that may hint that the sentencing has been less serious, but the total numbers of people have been increasing. In terms of the supervised community sentences going up, you can see that over the 5 years of pooled data, most people are getting more than 6 months, usually higher than between 6 and 24 months. If you wanted to look at a particular year, you can do that too, and so you can just select whichever year you want to look at. So we'll do one more example. Often we do get approached by people that are wanting to know if they are convicted of whatever crime they've been charged with, what the likely penalty that they will receive. So one particular example could be that you're a social worker and you've got a client that's presented to your office and she's been arrested for shoplifting. And you want to be able to give her some reliable and accurate advice about what to expect if she is convicted of this crime. So first of all, you have to choose your offence. So you know that shoplifting is a theft offence. So we choose theft, and then we want to choose theft again in the subdivision, and then theft from retail premises. So that's shoplifting. We know as well that we have a female offender, so we can choose gender there. So straight away you can see 100% of females are, in the last 5 years, had their matter heard at the local court. Again, you can see that we're only looking at female data, and all of the displays have updated to show just females. In terms of the most prevalent sentence, it's a fine at 38%, and you can see that most of the people that are receiving that fine are having a fine of between $300 and $600. Of the 8% of people that do have a prison sentence imposed, they're the shorter sentences, usually 0 to 6 months. You can see there has been a fair bit of change though over the time, over these years with the sentence types, and that the sentence durations for those increases in the community sentences, supervised community, have also been reflected down here in the duration graph. So in terms of other things that we do have on this page, if you ever get stuck or you want some advice about how to use the tool, you can go to this user guide link, and it will take you straight to our Boxar website. And we've got a informative page here about the different counting units, how to select an offence, how to refine your selection, also brief descriptions of what different sentence types are, as well as a frequently asked questions blurb, which includes information about what browser types are best, how often do we update the data, how do you print or save. We also have a glossary. So this is very comprehensive. It's a very long page, and it relates to all of the Boxar New South Wales Criminal Court statistics publications. So not just this sentencing tool, but also our court reports and also any of our research publications that use court data. And so you can just use the anchor points here to choose what you're interested in. So if you wanted to know more information about the penalty types, just click P, and it would take you to all of the different penalties that we use in Boxar publications. So that brings me to the end of